Back on the record in the Simpson matter, Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, and Mr. Blazier and Mr. Scheck, people represented by Mr. Goldberg and Mr. Darden. Record should reflect the absence of Ms. Clark. Mr. Darden, I understand that Ms. Clark is ill today.
She is not available.
All right, and my understanding is that you wish to proceed in her absence and request that I advise the jury that she's not available today, but the prosecution chooses to go forward. All right. All right, the record should also reflect that we have had an in-chambers conference regarding a item in the newspaper which slipped by our censors, and we've interviewed the jurors who had access to that, and I requested counsel to confer and see if there's any further requests for any inquiry. All right. Mr. Darden?
We're satisfied, Your
All
Honor.
right, and I'm referring to the Mike Peters cartoon in the August 23rd edition of the Los Angeles Times. All right, Mr. Cochran, I take it you have no personal objection to that?
No, Your Honor, I'll be representing that individual soon, so no, I have no objection to it.
All right. Since you were the person involved.
Yes, no problem.
All right.
Just the
If I were you, I would have found it both humorous and complimentary.
yes, Your Honor brought it to my attention. In fact, I hadn't seen it, so I appreciate it.
All right. That's the only part of the Times I read these days. Mr. Blazier, all right, we need to go on to the swatch drawing experiment argument. Do you have anything else before we launch into that?
Yes, very briefly. I filed a brief this morning with respect to the discovery violation / sanction.
I would not call that a brief. I would call that a tome.
Well, most of it's attachments. It's just a copy of the notes that supposedly were
But the fact
described.
that it's an inch and a half thick.
Well, here's what I'm suggesting. The brief is only 9 pages, but what I'm suggesting is I can't imagine that the prosecution is going to be able to show any harm from what turns out to be 21 pages that relates to Dr. Lee's testimony, all of which was contained in his report. If the court is going to consider imposing any kind of instruction or any other sanction, I would ask that you review that prior to doing it. Otherwise, I would suggest that you defer this until you have more time. It's not worth the time, quite frankly. But if you're going to impose anything, I would request that you review it.
May I
All
respond
right.
to that briefly, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, we prepared a list yesterday, actually. Ms. Martinez prepared this for me, of the items that Dr. Lee testified to and the references to those items in various reports. In other words, it correlates the materials that we previously provided to the court by dividing them by subject matter. And I'm wondering whether the court might want to take a look at that and have a copy of that document.
Yes.
The other thing is, Your Honor, we would like to take a look at researching the issue of motions to reconsider. I've done this before and argued this before, but not for a couple of years. And there are provisions either in the Rules of Court or the Code of Civil Procedure dealing with when it can or cannot be done. And perhaps we should do that before the court undertakes the process of reading this brief.
Well, Mr. Goldberg, let me tell you frankly what my thought process is, and maybe this will help you. In fashioning any sanction, it's important to know what the nature of the harm was and what the prejudice was, which is why I've asked you to respond in a specific, item-specific way. What is it about this particular item in Dr. Lee's notes, the fact that you did not receive those notes until, the 8th of August or so, and the fact that Dr. Lee started his testimony on, as I recollect, the 22nd. What is it about that information and that 14-day period that didn't give you sufficient time to prepare, or what came as a surprise, or what do you have to do? Say, for example, Dr. Lee's testimony regarding possible other shoe prints. Have to be precise in these things. Whether or not you had sufficient opportunity to send copies of these items to Mr. Boziak to consult with him. That's what I want to know. I want to know what the nature of the prejudice is, and I understand you're going to file that sometime this afternoon.
You want us to file it sometime this
So
afternoon?
I thought that's what I asked you to file.
You asked us to file it, but as I recall from reading the transcript, you didn't give us a time deadline.
Well, Dr. Lee, I assume, from our progress in the boards, is probably two-thirds of the way through his presentation.
Well, Mr. Scheck told me he is
finished
intending
this
to
morning.
finish by 12 o'clock, or maybe it will spill over a little bit
So the
to the
issue
next
is
day.
then whether or not you're
Okay.
entitled to a delay to prepare.
I understand.
Right.
But in terms of delay, Your Honor, just so the court knows, although the people's position is that perhaps we've been irreparably prejudiced, nevertheless, from a tactical perspective, we do not want any kind of an extensive a gap between the end of Dr. Lee's testimony and the beginning of our cross-examination. So at most, I mean, it is our hope that we can go as soon as possible being at the latest sometime very early next week. And now I know that the court also has this issue of Furman and that we have to work around that as well. I would like the opportunity to consult more with Ms. Clark about this. This is a tactical decision in which, in effect, we may decide to forego certain remedies that the court would otherwise believe us to be entitled to in terms of a continuance. But if
And let me just add one other factor for you to consider. My impression from observing the jurors, and unfortunately you weren't privy to our discussion with one of the jurors this morning, but my impression is that they are tired. And
We understand
they
that.
are, I wouldn't say close to the brink, but they're certainly within eyesight.
we
And-
understand. And that's why we're balancing what is the additional benefit we get from more preparation against the detriment that would be suffered by having Dr. Lee's testimony not subject to cross-examination.
But do you really?
And also the jurors
But
as
let me
well.
ask you this. Do you really want to do anything more in this situation than have Dr. Lee accentuate the positives that go to your case? For example, his apparent opinion that these are Bruno Magli shoes, and that although these appear to be parallel patterns, he can't say for sure that it's a shoe print. It looks like a shoe print, but he can't say for sure.
Your Honor, these are the kinds of tactical issues that are going in, and what I'm trying to indicate to the court is that our tactical belief and indication is we want the cross-examination to go at some time very, very early next week, and I'd like the opportunity to discuss that with Ms. Clark.
I understand
and
that.
tell the court about our answer this afternoon. But if that is the case, does the court want me to use a substantial amount of my preparation time right now going through these documents in order to provide the court with a more detailed list of prejudice? I would
No,
prefer.
if you represent to the court that it's your position now that you desire to proceed as quickly as possible without asking the court for any substantial delay, then my preference is that you spend your time doing that.
Well, that would
Because
be
frankly, if I were in your shoes, I would cross-examine Dr. Lee for about half an hour, accentuating the positives of my case, doing it in a very professional, friendly manner with him, given his reputation, and get out.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What I would do.
Thank you. And we will certainly consider the court's comments, and I understand exactly what Your Honor is saying. And my representation is, yes, we have every intention and expectation of not asking. We are not going to ask for any significant delay, and we have every expectation of going forward at some time in the early part of next week. And I would like to spend my time in preparation rather than sanctions, and then we will be asking for other kinds of sanctions in the way of jurors' instructions and so on, but I'd like to concentrate on that after
All right.
Dr. Lee's testimony, if we may.
All right, then let's proceed to the argument regarding sock drying.
Your Honor, just in that regard, I know I spoke to Mr. Goldberg about this, and he was indicating to me that he was, well, I don't want to characterize it, but Monday was likely. What we would just like to know, maybe he can tell us, he indicated to me he wants to speak to Ms. Clark, and by sometime this afternoon, Dr. Lee's going back to Connecticut. He has very important business, and he needs to know, from purposes of scheduling, our position about prejudice is contained in the papers Mr. Blazer filed. but we would just like to know something by this afternoon so that we
Well,
can make appropriate
I
plans.
assume that just as a matter of courtesy, Mr. Goldberg will try to give us some information in that regard by this afternoon.
Your Honor, one point, quick point before we proceed to the argument on the swatch drawing having to do with the next board that's coming up. I just have a quick question, and that is this.
Which board is this?
This is the Rockingham board. You have it in front of you. I noticed last night that...
The Rockingham board.
Right.
Which one are we referring to?
It's only one board, and...
The only Rockingham board I have is History of Socks.
No.
Wait. This the front foyer?
That's correct. If you look at the picture on the bottom right, Dr. Lee's testimony will concern finding 3 other small blood drops, or finding additional ones other than the ones that were collected, and he saw outlines of the ones that were collected. He was not going to testify to any positive presumptive tests that he performed at that time. He will be testifying to certain negative presumptive tests. I noticed in the bottom right-hand photograph that where it depicts the location of the various drops, that there is a swab on the ground, which looks like, or could be interpreted as, a presumptive test. There's no intention to elicit any testimony about that and the results of those tests, but I had some concerns that if I displayed that photograph in that fashion, that the prosecution might contend that we had opened the door. And if that, I just wanted to iron that out. If that's going to be the case, then we'll cover up that photograph. We have no intention of eliciting it. The other
I
thing
take
that
it the swab is being used as a pointing device, something that just sort of came to hand at that location, rather
Yes.
than the little red tapes and things?
it serves that purpose there.
Okay.
Well, that's kind of an ambiguous response to the court's answer, because you can clearly see that there is a very distinct and unnatural color on these swatches, a bluish green tinge that's caused with the orthotolidine test that Dr. Lee performed. So it is in some ways more distinctive looking than the phenolphthalein test results, which are pink and could conceivably by a layperson be mistaken for blood. This cannot be mistaken for blood. This is clearly the result of a presumptive test. It would be our position that this does open up the door on presumptive blood testing. I guess counsel could probably cover up the little cards with the Q-tips on them. I mean, that would be one way of handling it.
What did we, Dr. Lee found other apparent blood stains, did a test on them. What test did he do?
He did an autolidine presumptive test on those stains. I mean,
And what was the result?
they were positive. I mean, I don't think there's any difference between either side. That there were, I believe, 3 blood drops, 2 or 3 on item number 12, 3 that were collected by LAPD in that location and were confirmed later to be blood. In fact, there was an RFLP test done at Cellmark on item number 12. This was a high concentration of DNA. Dr. Lee found 3 other small drops in that area. Applying another rule that we'd applied in this with respect to presumptive tests with the prosecution and the SOC, I suppose I could argue that they could come in on the grounds that it's all stains in the same area, but we don't choose to elicit that it's a presumptive test. The only presumptive test that the jury has heard about, I believe, is the phenolphthalein test, where the swatch turns red, and I think part of our concern with the other pictures where we struck them was that when you see a red swab, you might think it's blood, and it's only a presumptive test. So this photograph was there to just show the location. That's all he's going to testify to, and they are black. So that's the state of the record. I just, I don't want to open the door, so it's up to the court as to what you want to do with that picture.
All right, well, the court's ruling is pretty clear, though, on presumptive tests that are not backed up by a confirmatory test, since we're talking presumptive
We're
tests.
not eliciting that testimony.
Right. So if you want to use it, I suggest you go along with, Dr. Lee can testify that he saw other reddish stains on the floor in close proximity to the 3 tested by the people. These are them. Thank you very much.
Referring to that photograph?
Referring to that photograph, but I think Mr. Goldberg's suggestion that the cards be covered so that the Q-tip isn't, tip of the Q-tip isn't apparent. It's probably the way to go if you want to use the photograph. He can testify to that without the photograph.
Can I just look at the board and see if
Sure.
Your Honor, it actually might even be possible for counsel to simply cover up the bluish green tinge. That way the jurors would not know whether these were simply being used as pointers as opposed to the testing device.
You can get some white out if such a thing still exists. All right, sure. Mrs. Robertson, have we any white out? All right, let's go on to the argument regarding swatch drying. Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. We filed a brief on this, as counsel did. Counsel, in one of his arguments in passing, noted that the People's Points and Authorities wasn't filed until a few weeks after we received discovery of the experiment. I don't think that that's really either here or there, because we don't actually have to file written points and authorities in moving papers. This is something that we've been doing in Your Honor's court, in this case, and flooding the court with
Mr.
paperwork.
Goldberg, the only thing I'm interested in is whether or not you feel there's substantial similarity between the two situations.
Okay, thank you. The people believe that there is not substantial similarity between the two situations, and there are several factors that are involved. Actually, Mr. Scheck characterized most of them in his responses to them in his points and authority, starting on page 6. The issue as to whether the swatch, the test tubes, and first of all, maybe I should start by explaining a little bit about the significance of this, or does the court already know what the defense theory is and why they want this to come in?
Well, I have an idea as to why they want to bring it in just from looking at the exhibits.
Okay.
But seeing as how I'm the trial judge and not preparing the case, I don't know what the evidence is until it's presented to me at the same time the jury gets it.
Okay. The defense theory is that there are in fact transfer stains in bindle number 47, which is the bindle that contains Dennis Fung's initials and the item number on it. Therefore, it's an original bindle. This particular bindle was created on June the 13th by Mr. Fung in the morning, sometime after 7 o'clock, when, according to the door entry, he first went into the room. And obviously before 10 o'clock, which is when Mr. Yamauchi sampled the various evidence for the purposes of PCR testing. The bindle was then eventually booked into the evidence control unit, where it's frozen, as the court has already heard in testimony. And that bindle, that particular bindle, remained in the possession of the Los Angeles Police Department until August the 12th of last year, when it was mailed to the Department of Justice, or it was sent to the Department of Justice in an unfrozen condition. In other words, in a condition where it could thaw out, and then was received by Mr. Sims of the Department of Justice, and he photographed it apparently before he did any testing on the same date. And that photograph depicts the transfer stain. So we know that the transfer occurred circumstantially at some time between June the 13th, when the bindle was created, and August the 12th, when Gary Sims photographed it. The theory that the defense is propounding appears to be twofold, but either this is evidence of swatches being re-wet either intentionally or accidentally, probably more likely intentionally, and that counts for the transfer, or there was swatch switching. Again, going to the issue of planting.
All right, refresh my recollection as to 47. Is that one of the Bundy walkway drops?
Yes, Your Honor, that's the first dot in the Bundy walkway. And it was also the subject of Colin Yamuchi's PCR testing. Now, the way that the swatches were dried out is they were put in the cabinet at the Los Angeles Police Department in the small test tubes, one of which we introduced into evidence. First, in looking at the photographs that were provided, and I could be wrong because I'm looking at photographs, it appears that the test tubes may be plastic instead of glass. Not sure whether that's material. And I can't tell whether the smaller test tubes are the identical size and whether the opening is the same as the LAPD test tubes. The LAPD test tubes are disposable glass test tubes that are thrown away after the swatches are dried. So that's one point. The other point is that the LAPD test tubes are placed in the cabinet lying down, whereas Dr. Lee's test tubes were upright. Now, I guess there are advantages and disadvantages to both, because you could argue that upright, for the purposes of contamination, that substances might be more likely to go into the test tube than lying down. But there should be a difference in airflow, and there could also be a difference in terms of precipitation, because if the test tube is lying down, there's in effect a ceiling. And there is no ceiling if the test tube is standing up. And that appears to be a potential material circumstance. We also talked about not being able to replicate temperature and humidity. Counsel says that the lab was air conditioned. I don't recall that testimony. He doesn't have a citation in the transcript, and I don't know whether it was or not, but I don't believe it's in the record one way or the other. So trying to replicate the exact temperature and humidity cannot be done. And we do know from the generic literature on drying experiments that this can play a very important role in terms of the length of time that it takes items to dry. The next issue that we cannot determine, I'm not saying that they failed to determine this, I don't believe it can be determined or replicated, is exactly what proportion of distilled water to blood was used at the time that the swatches were collected in the field by Andrea Mazzola. And the court will recall the last two times we discussed the issue of drying experiments, that there's some case law to the effect that where there are certain variables that cannot be determined, that those variables that cannot be replicated are a basis for exclusion of the test as not being substantially similar. The most important issue, as far as we are concerned, next to the issue of whether or not the test tubes were standing up or lying down, is the question of the swatches, the number of swatches in the test tubes. I am not positive, 100% positive, how the test was performed. From my discussions with Dr. Lee on this point. I now believe, based upon my most recent discussions, which were very brief in this courtroom, that what he did in the case of the test tube, the single test tube that contained 6 swatches, which was the maximum number of swatches that any test tube contained, is that he put a number of swatches in that test tube because he wanted to be able to take one out each hour and then place it on a bindle for the purposes of seeing whether or not there was a transfer, which would necessitate, of course, opening up the cabinet, going into the test tube with a forceps, presumably, taking a swatch out and testing it. Then the next hour, he'd take another swatch out and test it. Next hour, take another swatch out and test it to see whether there was a transfer. Obviously, none of that was done in our particular case. The opening of the cabinet, the reventilation of the cabinet, perhaps redistributing the swatches in the course of plucking one of them out. And What also was not done is, in our particular case, in the case of 47, we have 8 swatches in that particular tube. In fact, I think there were more swatches in that particular tube than any of the others, which could be a reason accounting for the differences in drying time. One possibility that is probable, we believe, is that swatches become stuck together in what I suppose we could call a swatch sandwich. And that the meat of the sandwich, as well as the bread sides that are facing the meat, are not going to dry as quickly as the exterior portions of the sandwich.
All right, well, Mr. Goldberg, you should assume that I've read your points and authorities, and
Right.
thus far the arguments you made, I've heard
Okay.
or I've read. Do you have anything additional you want to add to your points and authorities?
Well, I don't think that I mentioned the fact of taking it one swatch out at a time, and not keeping a bunch of swatches in a condition where they would be likely to be stuck together. And now
No,
counsel
you've got
says,
it stuck together.
what?
Never mind.
I didn't, okay. Now counsel says, well, some of these things, there's no evidence for one way or the other, and the prosecution has to prove that it didn't happen. No, I think that the obligation under the case law that we cited is for the proponent of the test to show the substantial materiality of the circumstances, and to the extent that that cannot be done, the test should be excluded. This test appears to be more speculative than the sock drying experiment test. At least with the sock drying experiment, at least some of them, it seemed like a crude attempt had been made to replicate the circumstances to the extent that the defense felt that they could be replicated. Here, the way that the test is designed, by its design, does not replicate all the material circumstances, particularly in ways that are important. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Mr. Goldberg indicates that at least one argument the prosecution will make and has made in its brief is the suggestion that the swatches were originally dry, and then when they were put in the freezer and taken out of the freezer, condensation formed, and that accounts for the wet transfer observed at the Department of Justice and is noted in the notes of Gary Sims. That argument is irrelevant to this experiment and this discussion, because the point at issue here is whether or not the swatches on the morning of June 14th, when taken out of the test tubes, were wet or dry. That's the point in contention. The record here indicates that Andrea Mazzola testified in August that when she assisted Dennis Fung in removing the swatches from the test tubes, that she initialed the bindles, or she put her initials on at least some of the bindles. None of these bindles have her initials. That was established at this trial. We've also established at this trial, through the testimony of Thano Paradas, that there's 8 cc's of blood in the calibrated needle that he withdrew blood from Mr. Simpson, and we've established that Colin Yamauchi used 1 cc when he made the swatch, the Fitzco card, and that the next business record recording is toxicology, and they measured the amount of blood in the tube, and that's 5.5 milliliters. That means at least 1.5 milliliters of blood is missing. That is part of the background here. There is wet transfer on the original bindle 47. I don't think that's in dispute by any of their experts, and even from Mr. Goldberg's argument. The issue is, what could have caused that wet transfer? We think that it's self-evident that, frankly, if you put swatches in a test tube in this fashion, they should dry overnight. It's the testimony of Dennis Fung and Andrea Mazzola that these swatches were in fact dry. They both testified to that fact. They both testified that the procedure involved, Mazzola is very specific in the page citations I put in the brief, that they would not put them in the bindles if they were wet. Colin Yamauchi testified that he noticed nothing unusual about the bindles when he cut the swatches. He further testified that with respect to another item, he did note when he did his drawings, whether or not swatches were stuck together. In fact, I know the court recalls from our split hearing that there was one set in particular where he noted the swatches were stuck together. So it seems to me that the record, as far as swatches sticking together or swatch sandwiches, presumptively, based on the testimony, if there were swatches sticking together, they would be noted, and it was noted in the instance where it occurred, and if they weren't sticking together if they were sticking together for 47, it should have been noted by one of these people. Seems to me a fair inference from this record. Now, Dr. Lee went about doing this swatch drawing experiment in a controlled fashion. The key here is that the swatches are the same swatches used by LAPD. We got them from LAPD, as opposed to the sock drawing experiment where nobody has been able to find the same kind of sock. And that is a material difference because when you're trying to determine drying, you need the same kind of material. So we have the same swatches. We got it from them. Dr. Lee then went about doing a controlled experiment whereby he performed a swatch collection in exactly the same fashion described by Fung and Mazzola, by putting a drop of blood outdoors on cement, letting it dry, swatching it in the same fashion they described, and creating a series of outdoor swatches. Then as a control, he took a series of indoor swatches where he saturated the swatches with whole blood, and he performed both experiments simultaneously to see if there would be any differences in terms of volume of blood versus distilled water, and found no differences. Essentially, within the range of drying times here, what you find is that when you take swatches out of the test tubes after 1 hour, you see wet transfer, as is depicted in it's all documented in photos. When you take swatches out after 2 hours, you still see some evidence, but less, of wet transfer. And after 3 hours, none of the swatches reveals any evidence of wet transfer. They're all dry. Now, he also varied the number of swatches in the tubes in order to try to control for how they might have fortuitously been in a tube overnight. 2 tubes had 1 swatch, 1 tube had 2 swatches, 1 tube had 3 swatches, 1 tube had 4 swatches, 1 tube had 6 swatches. He informs me that they are plastic tubes. He also varied the size of the tubes to account for differences in circulation, and they all turned out, again, to have the same pattern in terms of drying. He also put, as we indicated, different numbers in the tubes. The fact that the tubes were upright and the swatches were on top of each other is a fact which, in effect, favors the prosecution, since it's their contention that swatches creating a sandwich might tend to dry when they're on top of each other more slowly than if they're separated from each other. So to that extent, that difference, which we don't think is a material difference in terms of substantial similarity, favors them. Now, the record is clear from Mr. Matheson and from
But
all
is there
our...
anything in the California case law that says that if a condition more favors one particular side, I can ignore the substantial similarity requirement?
No, but I'm just pointing out that you have to make a discretionary ruling as to whether something is substantially similar or not, whether the differences are material. We don't have to prove identity with respect to the condition. The issue here is whether or not their objections are material for purposes of these experiments. And we don't think that these differences are conceivably material for the limited purpose for which the experiment is being offered. And if they think there is a difference, or they're given this set of circumstances, they're perfectly free to do their own experiments to prove ours are wrong in terms of the range of time it takes for a swatch to dry. Now, we've all been to the evidence processing room in the cabinet. It's described as a normal room, air-conditioned in the lab. It's room temperature, an ordinary cabinet. That was the testimony. No special heating or cooling there. So on the assumption that it's 25 degrees centigrade, Dr. Lee put his swatches in a cabinet that is substantially similar to the cabinet we see depicted in the photographs in this room. If there is some factor here, unbeknownst to any of us, that the evidence processing room, for some reason at LAPD, was unusually hot or unusually cold, and it wasn't room temperature, then they're perfectly free to bring that on to prove that there's a material difference here. But I don't hear any of that, and I think the record, based on the testimony of everybody and our visits to the lab, is that it's room temperature.
But don't you agree that ought to be the obligation of the proponent to establish that?
Well, the record is that this was a room at room temperature, and that and they put it in an ordinary cabinet. So we replicated that condition, and that's what the testimony will be. I think we've demonstrated that. With respect to the argument that the proportion of blood to distilled water on the evidence swatches is unknown, preventing duplication of this condition in the swatch drying experiment, Dr. Lee will testify that the actual swatches in this case and the outdoor swatches started with 1 drop of blood, which is approximately 0.05 cc's. He gets these numbers from extensive experimentation with blood drops, which he will testify to. And the range of variation ordinarily found is between 0.03 to 0.06. So unless the testimony is clear as to the methods used by Andrea Mazzola in wetting a swatch and taking the blood stain. Nothing in that testimony indicates that she would have saturated it with a volume of distilled water that, in Dr. Lee's opinion, could make any difference here, 10 cc's of water, in terms of this swatch drying experiment. And as I indicated, he did a control by having one set of swatches that were just saturated in blood indoors. So he tried to control for those conditions. And I think I've addressed the issue of whether the swatches were stuck together or not. I think the record is clear that they noted when swatches were stuck together, and according to them, there's no notation of swatches being stuck together here. So as far as that's concerned, they're free to argue to the jury or bring on a witness in rebuttal to say, I forgot to tell you, and I forgot to indicate in my drawings that the swatches were stuck together. And I think that about covers it, except for the fact that I think it is a critical issue as to getting a range before the jury as to when these kinds of swatches would dry and when they wouldn't, and when they would leave wet transfer and when they wouldn't. And that's the limited purpose for this. And for that limited purpose, we feel that this experiment is substantially similar to the conditions at issue, and that the prosecution has not shown that there are material differences that would weigh so heavily in this equation that this highly relevant evidence shouldn't go before the jury. And it's all documented. And finally, the reason that this experiment was the last thing Dr. Lee did just before filing his report, so they got this immediately within days of the completion of the experiment with all his notes, all the photographs, all the documentation. And they asked him about it a number of times already, weeks before he came in here to testify.
All right. Thank you, counsel. Briefly, if you must.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, and I'll just hit the issues very quickly, Your Honor. The idea that there's a common drop size between 50 and 60 microliters is something that is stated in Mr. McDonald's book on blood spatter. But I am not aware of empirical data to support that proposition. If Dr. Lee is going to rely on such material, I believe that we're entitled to have that in discovery, and I'm sure he probably provide it to us upon our request. I'm just saying I'm not aware of such material. I don't want to address what we believe to be non-issues, which are the questions of Andrea Mazzola saying of Andrea Mazzola's initials not being on the bindles, because she didn't bindle virtually any of the items there at all, and it's just neither here nor there. It doesn't go to the substantial material of the experiment, and I think we should concentrate on the issues at hand. Similarly, Dennis Fung's testimony that they appeared to be dry, which is what he's saying, but he did not check them, by feeling them, obviously, is again not in any way relevant to the substantial materiality of the test, which is the legal issue that we're dealing with. The swatches, it seems very likely, could have stuck together or been placed one on top of each other while they were lying down after being poured out into a bindle and then packaged could have been reconfigured, and we'll never be able to reconstruct those set of events. And I wouldn't expect that anyone could be expected to remember them. But the most important thing I'd like to say, Your Honor, in response to counsel's arguments in relationship to the freezing and unfreezing, and this is the last point I'll make because I know the court would like to get on with the matter. The issue is being defined more narrowly by counsel than it really is. He's saying all we want to show is how long it takes swatches to dry, and that's the issue, and therefore freezing and unfreezing is not relevant. The real issue is not how long it takes swatches to dry. No one cares about that. The issue is how do transfers occur in bindles. That's the issue that the defense cares about. That's the issue that parties are going to be arguing about. That is the issue that this experiment theoretically is supposed to provide additional evidence to the jurors about. And therefore, freezing and unfreezing, everything that happened to these swatches between the time that the bindle was created and the time that the transfer was noticed is relevant. And no one is aware of what the effect is on freezing and unfreezing, because a lot of the issues that have been brought up in this case, no one cares about. They haven't been investigated in the scientific literature. There are no experiments that have been done. So we are simply trying to make guesses. Well, this could happen, this might happen. Maybe if you did it this way, it would be different or more favorable to one side or the other. The point is we don't know. And this experiment doesn't tell us because it doesn't replicate substantially the material circumstances with respect to these items.
All right, thank you, counsel. All right, I've reviewed the points and authorities that were filed by both sides and heard the substantial argument. The issue before the court is whether or not the conditions of the experiment as offered substantially replicate the conditions of the swatch drying that was accomplished in this case. The court is aware from having reviewed the boards that the defense is going to offer photographs of the swatch bindles that are going to indicate some staining within, which is going to indicate that that the swatches were in fact wet at some point in time while they were within those bindles. And the defense can prove that by those photographs. I'm concerned that the temperature has not been documented and established, that the humidity, which would have an impact on the drying time, has not been documented or established, that we have not determined the blood or liquid content of these swatches, nor the particular drop size. I'm also concerned about the upright nature of the test tubes, given for all the humor about the sandwich problem, it is an issue that I'm not clear on. I therefore find that there is insubstantial similarity and the objection will be sustained. All right, let's have the jury. All right, let the record reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know quite how to tell you this. You have a rather unusual distinction. As a sequestered jury, as you know, you've been sequestered since mid-January. And as of yesterday, you have surpassed the amount of time that the Manson jury if you recollect from 20 years ago, was in sequestration, so some kind of a dubious record, I'm sure. In talking to some of you individually and in observing you, I know that you are a very tough and tenacious group of people. I know that you've made a commitment to see this matter through. And I know that you are disappointed with the delays that we've had, but I'm sure after I've tried to explain them to you, you understand that there's certain things that just have to be taken up out of your presence, and that take a substantial amount of time, unfortunately. I want you to know that I've expressed again my concern to the lawyers for both sides that we move this case along at a little faster pace. Before me right now, there is a very significant legal issue that I'm going to have to spend a considerable amount of time considering outside of your presence. But I'm going to be doing that this Friday afternoon, and I anticipate working on these matters over the weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, so that we don't take up jury time for those matters. I want you to know that we're very cognizant of the demands that we've made upon you. I know that this has not been an easy experience for any of you. Probably fun for about the first 8 hours, and then after that it became real tough. But each of you has shown us by your endurance and by your cheerfulness every day when you come in here that you're still with us. But I want you to know that we appreciate the burden that we've placed upon you and the demands and the restrictions that we've placed upon you. This is much worse than being in the Army, I'm sure, from your perspective. But I want you to know that each and every person involved in the prosecution and the defense of this case appreciates your sacrifices, and they will keep that in mind in the future as they prepare their examinations of witnesses, and will hopefully keep their examinations to what is absolutely necessary. All right, having said that, also, Ms. Clark, one of the lead prosecutors, is not available today. However, the prosecution has decided to proceed in her absence, and she can read the transcript and or see it on TV to catch up with us. All right? Dr. Lee, would you resume the witness stand, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let the record reflect that Dr. Henry Lee is again on the witness stand, undergoing direct examination by Mr. Scheck. All right, good morning again, Dr. Lee.
Good morning.
All right, Doctor, you're reminded, sir, that you were still under oath. Mr. Scheck, you may continue with your direct examination.
Yes. Thank you, Your Honor, and I hope to conclude the direct examination. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Dr.
And,
Lee?
excuse me, Mr. Scheck, Ms. Moxham, our court report indicates that she's probably able to go through to the noon hour. Right.
Your Honor, with permission of the court, I'd like to take out another.
You may. Mr. Harris?
This will be the minutes next in order is 1356. And this board is entitled Rockingham Residence Front Foyer.
All right, 1356. 8 photographs. All right, Dr. Lee, you may step down to see that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Lee, were these photographs taken on the June 25th visit that you previously have described to us at Mr. Simpson's home?
Yes.
All right. And could you please, starting with the photograph on the upper left-hand corner of 1356 entitled Front Entrance, describe for us what is shown on this board?
In June 25th, 1994, afternoon, approximately 4 o'clock, I took this photograph. Shows a overall view of this front entrance door. Enter the residence.
Dr. Lee, at that time, did you perform any presumptive tests on the doorknobs and lock mechanisms and light switches in this area?
Yes, sir.
What did you do and what were the results?
I did that chemical presumptive test. Generally, refer orthogonality test, which will react with heme or any peroxidase. A colorless reagent will turn to a blue color. If that turn to blue indicates certain result. If no reaction did not turn blue, means absence of blood.
What were the results of your test? Did you test anything on the doorknobs here?
I test both outside, inside, doorknob, door hinge, all the area, the light switches, and all this area, metal surface, the door side.
What were the results? Negative?
The result,
Objection, Your Honor, to present the blood testing.
Overruled.
all my test results were negative.
Did you examine the staircase going upstairs?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what did you do and what did you find?
I use a magnifying glass, look through every steps. Any step have a discoloration or brownish color or any other indication, I will perform a test.
What results?
All negative.
Would that be an indication that there was no blood of any kind that you could detect in your examination of the stairs leading up to Mr. Simpson's bedroom?
The area I tested, I did not find any blood.
Did you do something, did you perform the same examination of the hallway that leads into Mr. Simpson's bedroom?
The
Yes,
date
sir.
is to date, Your Honor.
This is all on June 25th, I take it?
Yes,
And what were the results there?
negative.
Now, call your attention to the foyer floor photograph. Could you tell us what that is?
Foyer floor photograph is depict a center portion of the front enter foyer. I have to point it out. This is not the imperfection of the floorboard. It's a photograph provided to me by Mr. Shapiro. That's an original photograph was taken by LAPD. I used that photograph to locate the floorboard. Floorboard have different number of pit or some type of like nail type of object, so I can identify this area. So I was subsequently able to locate the area LAPD tested.
Now this is, if one gets close to this photograph, one can detect that this is an evidence card indicating item number 12, and it shows 3 blood drops in that area. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so this photograph then, I guess you're saying, is your effort to locate exactly where that was on the floor as you saw it on June 25th.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Please proceed.
Upon checking the area, I was able to identify the 3 locations. The 3 locations apparently been swapped and created a swipe pattern. I was able to recognize that. Compared with the photograph, I was able to identify the location.
Did you locate any other reddish stains that were consistent with blood stains in that area?
Yes, sir.
Are those depicted on the remaining photographs?
Yes.
Could you please describe that?
Subsequently, I noticed there are 3 additional stamps. This stamp 1, stamp number 2, stamp number 3. This is a close-up view. The last column, top picture, shows this close-up view of this particular stamp.
So altogether, if one counts the 3 stains identified by LAPD as item number 12, and the stains that you found, how many blood stains were in this area altogether?
6.
Were there any differences that you could detect between in terms of size, with respect to these stains?
There are 3 which are already swabbed. One, I was able positively determine the size because the periphery crust still remain. 2 other, as you can see depicting this photo, being swabbed around. The diameter of this swabbed around area is approximately ½ inch. The original blood drop size is going to be much smaller than what they've been swabbed. Because when you drop a drop of stain, if you try to swipe it, you're going to create bigger area. The 3 I examined, use a scale, was able to determine 2 smaller one is 1/15 in diameter. The other one is 1 of the 10 inches, 1 of the 10 inches, 10th of the inch, and 15th of the inch. So it's a relative small blood stain.
Now, are some of these blood stains consistent with vertical droplets?
They're all consistent with droplet. It's not a regular blood drop. It's a droplet. It's smaller drops.
And so some are bigger, some are smaller?
Yes.
Would the smaller stains, would any of these be consistent with what is known as a cast-off pattern?
Yes.
And so if one had a superficial cut on the side of a finger and shook it in the fashion that I'm doing, let the record reflect that I'm shaking my hand down. Does that create cast-off pattern?
Yes.
And would that be consistent with what you found here?
Yes.
Could the pattern that you found here be consistent with a superficial cut on the side of a finger?
It's consistent with a small volume of blood.
Is the pattern that you see here consistent with a major cut?
No.
All right, yeah, we're finished with this work.
All right.
Dr. Lee, before I move on to the next series of boards, I'd like to ask you briefly some questions about the Bronco. Did you have an opportunity to personally examine and look at the Bronco?
No.
Could you do a reconstruction of the Bronco?
I cannot do a reconstruction because I did not have a direct examination, observation of an original condition.
Did you have an opportunity to look at some pictures of the blood in the Bronco?
Yes, I did. I looked at some of the photographs sent to me.
What is the pattern of the blood stains you saw in those photographs?
It's vague. It's vague.
Right. Could you, from looking at those pictures, characterize what kind of blood stain you saw?
Still vague, overly broad in their front page.
Found it, date, time, which photos, which part, date, time, which photos, which part of the Bronco.
Which photos did you look at?
How do I know?
Well,
I don't know.
Did you look at photos of the door, the driver's door of the photo of the Bronco?
Yes, I look at some photo appears to be depict a door.
All right. Did you look at photos of the console?
Yes, I did look at picture depict portion of the console.
Dr. Lee, what is a smear?
A smear is a contact with a movement.
Were the pattern of blood stains that you saw depicted in the photographs on the door and the console, were they smears?
Appear to be consistent with smear.
To the extent you could tell from the photographs, what kinds of smears are they in terms of the saturation?
I only,
Sustain.
From the photographs, could you make a judgment as to whether these were heavily saturated smears or light smears?
Still vague, no foundation.
Oh, well.
it consistent with light smear.
Now, take, for example, the console. What kind of surface is that?
I don't know.
Well, what is a non-absorbent surface?
Your Honor,
Sustain.
What is a non-absorbent surface?
In this context, it is.
Is a plastic, could you describe, in terms of absorbencies, can you characterize categories of surfaces?
Yes.
What are they?
Well, you can put in two general categories. Some are absorbent, some non-absorbent. Of course, there are some in between. A surface like plastic generally refer non-absorbent surface. A surface with a tissue, cotton, those clothes is referred as a absorbent surface.
I ask you to assume that the console that you saw in that photograph is a plastic surface, non-absorbent surface. Based on the photographs, can you make an estimate as to the volume of blood that it would take to create the smears, the light smears you saw on that surface?
no foundation speculation.
I think it's vague because they're separate smears appear to be on the console.
Well, you saw a series of smears on the console?
Your Honor, also no foundation as to which photos.
Sustain.
Have you seen photographs of the console with, let them,
Proceed.
with evidence tags on them provided to you from the LAPD?
Appear to be some photographs provided to me by the defense counsel.
Now, from those photographs, what can you tell precisely what the volume of blood is on those surfaces?
Still vague, no foundation.
Sustain.
With these photographs of the console,
Yes.
series of smears on the console.
Yes.
From those photographs, can you tell us precisely how much blood there was on that console?
Vague, no foundation speculation.
Sustain. Foundation counsel.
From the photographs you saw
Counsel, as
of,
soon as you say, we're not getting past the photographs. What photograph?
did you see photographs with evidence markers labeled 3031?
Leading.
Overruled.
I think I saw a photograph in that nature.
Did you,
Motion to strike speculation.
Overruled.
did you see additional photographs taken on August 26th that had numbers 303, 304, 305?
Counsel, these photographs are in evidence on boards. Why don't we just show them to Dr. Lee and say, these are the photographs you saw. Based upon what you saw there as to this area, can you tell us how much blood is there? Otherwise, the jury has no idea what we're talking about.
Trying to be expeditious, Your Honor. I think we all have seen these photographs.
Well, maybe Mr. Blazier can find it for you.
Something else, Your Honor. I thought this was self-evident, but in my desire to be expeditious.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
marked as Defense 1357, entitled Bloodstains on Evidence Bag.
So marked.
Well, better yet, before we do that, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to display 1167 and 1087. 1087 is photograph of the console with tags 30 and 31. And 1167 is the August 26th photographs of the stains on the console. Dr. Lee, I show you first 1087. Is that the photograph we were referring to before with the evidence tags 30 and 31 taken on June 14th?
Yes.
I'd like to show you the next photograph, which is 1167. Is that the console picture from the August 26th search with the numbers 303, 304, 305, and 306 on it? The ones we were talking about before.
Yes.
All right. Now, Dr. Lee, with respect to these photographs, going back to the question I was asking you before, I'm asking you to assume you did not actually inspect the physical, the console itself.
No, I
Didn't
did
get-
not.
Couldn't get to see the Bronco itself.
No.
Wait a minute, I object to couldn't get.
Did not see the Bronco itself.
Strike that.
He's rephrased the question. Proceed.
Did not see the Bronco itself.
No, I did not.
All right. So you can only base this on the pictures
Yes.
and the assumption that this is a non-absorbent plastic surface that I'm asking you to make.
Also assuming the color is a true representation of
Okay.
the original color
In the photographs.
photograph.
Given those limitations, based on what you see, can you tell precisely how much blood is on the console?
No foundation calls for an opinion, speculation.
Oral.
May we approach?
No.
I cannot tell you exactly volume just by looking these two pictures. There are methods. If I have the console, I can determine the volume.
Can you give us from the pictures an estimate as to, in terms of small or large, the kind of volume that would be required to make those kinds of smears that you observe in the photograph, given the limitations that have been described?
Vague, no foundation, speculation.
Vague. Small and large.
Well, could those smears be made with less than 1 cc of blood?
Same objection.
Oral.
Yes, could be made much less than 1 cc.
Thank you. Now, turning to what is, we call it 1357s? The board entitled Bloodstains on Evidence Bag. Dr. Lee, I'd ask you to come off the witness stand and describe for us, could you first tell us what are these pictures and where were they taken?
This board consists of 4 pictures, which was taken February 18, 1995, when I was in Albany Medical Center, examined some evidence sent to me by LAPD.
The picture on the upper left-hand corner of this board entitled Bloodstains on Outside of Paper Bag, Item 78 Boots. What does that show?
This is a view of a portion of the brown paper bag, which have a labeling, numbering, a set of initial, CY, and some lettering. It described to me this bag.
Seems to call for hearsay.
Sustained. Ask a question.
Based on the numbers there and the property report records you had, what item did this bag correlate with?
No foundation.
Oh, well.
Item 78 boots.
Ron Goldman's boots?
Yes.
What observations can you make based on this photograph?
This photograph is the opening of this paper bag. Near the lettering A-774, here I see a contact smear approximately 4 inches long. The ruler where indicates shows the length of this contact smear.
What is the photograph on the bottom left-hand side here?
Bottom left-hand side shows a close-up view of this contact smear area. The photograph, sorry. Is there anything else that we should observe about the close-up of this, what you have called, why do you call this wet blood transfers?
No foundation.
Sustained.
Right. The board contains the phrase wet blood transfers in relation to this picture. Could you please explain that? When I examine this stand carefully, it's a contact smear made of blood. This blood has to be in wet stage to get transferred. Once it's dried, you cannot transfer anymore. So that's why I refer a close-up view of a wet blood transfer.
And let me see if I understand this. You're saying that what has to be wet in order to cause this kind of transfer stain?
Yes, sir.
The object that is
The
making...
object, the surface, or items, or even a glove or any object have some wet blood touch this brown paper bag, cause this transfer with a motion.
And what is the photograph on the upper right-hand corner of this board entitled Bloodstains Inside Paper Bag, item 78? What does that represent?
The paper bag, when I look at the inside, I see wet transfer inside of the bag. The mechanism of this transfer remains the same. Has to be a wet surface, wet object with some wet blood, a surface object with some wet blood contact this brown paper bag cause such transfer.
And what is the picture in the lower right-hand that says close-up wet blood transfers?
The close-up shows some of the blood has soaked through other side to the exterior surface.
Now, is it a good procedure to put an object such as a boot that is still wet with blood inside a paper bag?
Soon as facts and evidence.
Oh, well.
I cannot say what the LAPD procedure. I did not review it. I'm not coming here to criticize anybody. My own procedure, if I collect, I don't put an object wet.
And why wouldn't you put a wet object into such a paper bag?
You cause a transfer, you change the pattern. If an object has 2 or 3 different type of blood grouping, because it's transfer, now you may result some false reading.
Is that, could create mixtures?
Yes.
where there weren't originally mixtures?
Yes,
Is that what's sometimes known as cross-contamination?
yes.
I think we're finished with this board. Dr. Lee?
All right, Mr. Scheck, you put up another board,
Yes, this would be
58.
1358. And this board is entitled History of Item 47, Blood Drop on Bundy Walkway. Dr. Lee, could you please describe for us this board, starting with the picture on the upper left-hand side titled Item 47 Overall View? What is that photograph? What does it show?
Item 47 overall view is a crime scene photograph taken by the LAPD photographer, subsequently provided to me by defense team, which depicts an overall view of this walkway with some number plate indicates certain locations.
The photograph immediately to the right, what is that?
This photograph also provided by the defense team. It shows a close-up view of this 112, photo plate number 112. That's a blood-like drop on the walkway at the Bundy walkway.
Now, on the bottom left-hand side of the board, there is a worksheet entitled Collection Note, June 13th, 1994. Could you please describe for us what this is?
This is a document which provided by you, indicates is a collection note.
Well, no foundation for personal knowledge, Your Honor.
Sustain.
All right, well, you provided the collection notes made out by Dennis Fung and Andrea Mazzola, as well as serology notes made by Colin Yamauchi as part of the discovery process in this case.
Hearsay calls for a conclusion, no personal knowledge.
Overall. Were you provided with such a document?
Yes, sir.
Next question.
Calling your attention to this collection note of June 13th.
No foundation through this witness.
We've already had testimony on this, Your
Oral.
Honor. What is this note?
It appears to be a documentation which shows the collection, the location of each stand, where they collected, and item number, property item number, and photo.
Your Honor, with permission, I'd like to take one of the yellow marker and just highlight item 47 on this particular note.
You may.
Dr. Lee, does this indicate, well, this photograph of, referring now to the item 47 close-up photo 112, this does not contain a ID photo with scale and ID.
Your Honor, this has been gone over.
Sustain. Picture pretty much speaks for itself, too, Counsel.
Yes. Were the number of swatches used to collect this gain counted or recorded on this note?
No, Your Honor, no foundation.
Oh, well, it's not there, but we went over this in cross-examination.
I understand.
Mr. Fung.
Just moving along and refreshing.
No, we don't need to refresh, counsel.
No. Dr. Lee, in your opinion, would it be your practice, if you were to take swatches in this fashion, to count and record the number?
Not relevant.
Oh, well,
I only can testify our procedure. I'm not here to criticize anybody else's procedure. It's a good practice to count the number.
I now call your attention to a serology note of June 14th, 1994, of Colin Yamauchi, and call your attention to the item 47. Have you reviewed this, Dr. Lee?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the,
all right, the record should reflect that counsel's highlighting that portion on that lower right-hand photograph.
are you familiar with the drawings made by Mr. Yamauchi of the swatches he found in the bindle for item number 47 on the morning of June 14th?
Yes.
And with respect to,
Your Honor, this has been the subject of previous testimony. I object in the
Oh, well.
and no foundation.
Oh, well, I haven't heard the question.
with respect to this diagram, on the area indicating samples remaining.
Diagram, counsel?
Sorry?
You're talking about Mr. Yamauchi's serology report, correct?
Yes.
You said diagram.
I'm sorry. In
Proceed.
the report, there's a box indicating sample remaining. All right.
Yes.
How many swatches are indicated there as remaining?
Same objection.
Sustained. Document speaks for itself, counsel.
Well, does the document indicate that 7 swatches are remaining?
Leaving, Your Honor, same objection.
Oh, well.
Yes.
All right. In terms of the diagram itself, how many boxes do you see there?
I counted appear to be 8.
Is there a notation here?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to any further questions on this document. It speaks for itself.
Speaks for itself, counsel.
No, Your Honor, this is foundational. I'm just moving on.
Counsel, we've seen it. You cross-examined Mr. Yamauchi extensively on it. What this witness happens to see there, the jurors have seen the document. The document is here in front of them.
Yes.
Let's proceed.
Move expeditiously. Is there one section there indicating that one of those swatches was sampled?
Your Honor, that's improper.
Sustained.
Next board, please. Just a second.
Nope, proceed.
This board would be 1359. It's entitled History of Item 47, Blood Drop on Bundy Walkway. Dr. Lee, on the left-hand side of this board, there is a report indicating worksheet by Mr. Yamauchi that's entitled Serology Note of July 21st, 1994. Do you recognize this as a summary sheet indicating a transfer of swatches?
Document speaks for itself.
Oh, well.
Yes.
What does it indicate?
No foundation calls for hearsay.
Sustained. Document speaks for itself, counsel.
There's a section here indicating
Same objections.
Oh, well.
date, time, sample prepared, 7/1994, size, description, prepared sample, and a diagram of 5 swatches And then a next box indicating dates sent. July 24th, 1994. Do you see that?
Your Honor, same objections. May we approach?
Overruled. No, neither of you. Now proceed.
And is another box here indicating sample remaining size and description, and that has 2 swatches. Is
No
that correct?
foundation, calls
Overruled.
for hearsay, speculation.
Counsel is directing the witness's attention to a particular part of this document. I assume there's a question coming after this.
Yes. Now, Dr. Lee, on the right-hand side of that diagram, there is a picture that indicates 5 swatches, July 27th, 1994 cell mark. Did you take that picture?
Yes.
Could you explain the facts and circumstances that led you to take that picture?
On July 27th, 1994, we had a court order, received that document by the defense team to appear in cell mark to observe the testing and to remove 10% of the sample from each
Narrative.
item.
Overruled.
When you arrived at Cellmark, did you have an opportunity to see these samples unpacked?
This particular sample, yes.
All right. Did you have an opportunity to photograph them
Yes.
as they were unpacked?
Yes.
What is that photograph we see there?
This photograph depicts on July 27, when this sample, number item 47, with a letter H, unpacked, inside contains 5 swatches. Subsequently, we label together with the cell mark scientist HA, HB, HC, HE, and HD to indicate this H is from 47 and 5 separate swatches, A, B, C, D, E.
All right. Did you subsequently receive a photograph that was taken on August 12, 1994 at the Department of Justice of 2 swatches from item 47 and the bindle in which it arrived?
Yes,
Is that depicted at the bottom right-hand side of this photograph?
this photograph depicts a portion view of a Melena envelope with item 47, however, with a letter B as a boy. Inside contains 2 swatches.
Have the next board, please. This would be 1360. Your Honor, just for the record, I'm going to highlight the item 47 on the worksheet.
Yes. All right, this will be 1360.
Now, Dr. Lee, you're familiar with the kinds of swatches used by the Los Angeles Police Department for creating the swatches in this case?
Yes,
Have you actually examined samples of swatches provided to you by them?
yes,
Are you familiar with the material?
yes,
Do you have experience in how long it would take one of these swatches that had distilled water and blood on it, in the fashion described by Ms. Mazzola, in terms of swatching blood? Do you have some experience in assessing the time it takes such a swatch to dry?
Your Honor, I object. Will we approach?
Overruled.
I have experience swatch, use similar type of cotton swatch myself, or my people, or my student, we determine the time required for a swatch to draw. I don't know what Ms. Mazzula, I did not observe her to swatch it, so I cannot say I have experience with her.
Now,
Non-responsive, Your Honor.
Overruled.
in your opinion, how long would it take one of these swatches to dry if it were put into a test tube in a wet state and the test tube was open and the test tube and the environment was a cabinet at room temperature?
Your Honor, no.
Sustained.
In your judgment, ordinarily...
Counsel, be careful here.
Okay. Your
Your Honor, may we approach?
No.
your opinion, how long would it take?
Let's try again. Move on. Move on. Move on.
To ask you to assume that a swatch, a wet blood swatch, was put into a test tube and left there for 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours. All right, I'll withdraw that question for the time being. Dr. Lee, I call your attention now to what is been marked as Defense 1360, a board entitled History of Item 47, Blood Drop on Bundy Walkway, Blood Swatches and Bloodstain Patterns of Wet Transfers. Dr. Lee, could you describe what the first photograph in the middle of this board is?
The first photograph depicts in the board upper row is cell mark. At that time, we photographed the 5 swatches.
And what is the photograph in the lower left-hand side here?
Second photograph is a close-up view of the DOJ photograph. Shows the 2 swatches. In addition, there are some reddish color imprint on this so-called binder. Paper, actually it's a piece of paper.
Incidentally, Dr. Lee, what procedures do you use to dry swatches with blood, and how long, in your experience, does it generally take?
Not relevant under course, and also, Your Honor.
Sustained. Sustained.
Now, Dr. Lee,
You can ask him what's indicated by this photograph.
well, I'm going to get to that, Your Honor, but I think I have, well, we'll
Proceed.
discuss this later. Now, Dr. Lee, in the course of reviewing discovery in this matter, did you have occasion to review notes made by Gary Sims at the Department of Justice with respect to his observations of item number 47, the bindle and the swatches that he received on August 18th, 1994?
Calls for hearsay, no foundation.
Overruled. The fact that he examined something doesn't call for hearsay.
All right, and are the
Do
notes...
you want an answer to that question, Mr. Scheck?
Yes, I thought he said yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're welcome.
And are the
notes that Mr. Sims made with respect to his observations, the kinds of materials that an expert in your field ordinarily relies upon in forming scientific opinions.
Yes.
And I'd like to for the record, I'll ask to mark these 2 pages, 1360A, document of 2 pages.
All right,
Mr. Simpson's
1368.
May I take a look at it, Your Honor?
Sure.
I think I know. There's some markings on this.
I'll get a redacted copy.
All right.
Thank you. Dr. Lee, show you this note. Now, are you familiar with it?
Yes.
Now, with permission, I'd like to read the note and ask Dr. Lee if the observations here are consistent with what he sees in the photograph.
Calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Do these notes reflect observations by Mr. Sims that are consistent with what you see in this photograph?
Calls for conclusions and objections.
Overruled.
Yes.
Is there a record here of the wet transfer that you just pointed out to the jury and a
Sustained.
description of it?
Sustained, that's hearsay.
On the second page of this document, does Mr. Sims indicate with respect to item 49,
Your Honor. single-
Sustained. Mr. Cochran?
call your attention now to the photograph entitled New Haven on this board. Could you please describe what that is?
This is a photograph which I took at New Haven, April 2nd, 1995, when finally the original bindle, so-called bindle, actually it's a paper packet, sent to me. I photographed that. Shows one swatch light.
Now, I ask you to examine this photograph, which I'd like to mark
60.
1360C. Small photograph.
What was B?
I think A with the 2 pieces of paper for Mr. Sims, and I'd ask that this photograph be marked as B.
B. Madam Reporter, how's your paper supply?
Dr. Lee, what is 1360B?
1360B is a photograph which I took. Shows the interior surface of this paper packet or bindle. With my ruler indicates the presence of some wet transfer imprints.
Court's permission, I'd like to put this up for a minute on the element.
Yes. think we're slightly out of focus there, Mr. Harris. Thank you.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the, you'll have to use the telestrator and focus on two
Put
at
an
a time.
arrow on the items he notes.
Dr. Lee, using the telestrator, could you point out the stains of interest, and please direct Mr. Harris on.
Got it. Oops. Basically shows the 4 transfer input.
Print this out as 1360
C.
C.
All right, let's clear the telestrator. Mr. Sheck.
Dr. Lee, you've now focused in on 2 of these transfers. Could you please identify them and describe them?
The first one appears to be a parallelogram, a pattern of transfer. The second one is consistent with a square shape transfer.
Could we print this out as 1360 D?
D, as in David.
D as in David.
Go ahead, Mr. Sheck.
All right. Read them.
It doesn't take long to capture, it just takes longer to print it out.
No, I understand.
All right.
Howard, says I can't move it. Move to the other side, please. Dr. Lee, what is this?
Here is another parallelogram, transfer imprint. Here appears to be a double triangle transfer imprint.
Should we print that out as 1360E?
E as in Edward.
Now, Dr. Lee, I take it that the picture in 1360 that you made of swatches at Selmark and the picture that you took in New Haven as is reflected by 1360A, the one that we had up in the Elmo, both have rulers,
Yes.
all right? And by means of that as a scale, were you able to do enlargements of, and
I should withdraw. And also, the picture from the Department of Justice, I see, has a ruler.
Yes.
And by means of using those rulers as scales, were you able to do enlargements of the swatches depicted in this board and also the bindle that you saw in New Haven?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would like to now move to the next board. This would be 1361.
So marked.
History of item 47, blood drop on Bundy Walkway. Dr. Lee, what is this?
Before we do, Your Honor, I made a mistake.
All right, why don't you talk with Mr. Scheck briefly?
It's March 9th.
Wait, excuse me, counsel. Mr. Scheck, why don't you confer with your witness for a moment?
Dr. Lee, what you just indicated that you made an error in your discussion. Could you please describe what that is?
Just now, I appear say April 2nd, 1995. If our memory serves me correctly, that's incorrect. Should be March 9, 1995. You have it.
What does this board represent? The photographs here.
This shows the date which, when the bindle shipped to me by Johnny Cochran's office, I open up the bindle, paper packet. Inside have a small paper packet, contains one swatch. Wet transfer was noticed, so I took a series of photographs to show this wet transfer.
And one of those photographs was the one we put up on the elbow before.
Yes, this is the top one.
All right,
Which
so
photograph? I'm sorry, counsel. Which photograph?
he's indicating that 1360...
No, I understand. Which is one of the photographs we put up on the
I'm
envelope.
about to say. 1360C is a close-up of blood patterns of wet transfer that is reflected on this exhibit in the upper right-hand corner and is so labeled.
Yes, sir.
And that is the photograph with the ruler.
Yes.
Now, I think we can move to the next board.
Your Honor, on this board, I'm going to object, subject to a motion to strike for accurately blowing up the photograph.
All right.
Now, I'd like this board marked as defense 1362.
62.
And, Dr. Lee, what is this?
This is a further enlargement of the photograph. It just depicts in a previous exhibit the top one of the second column.
And Dr. Lee, going to mark a series of, have 7 brown photographs, each separate, and I'd ask you to tell us what these are. And first just generally, and then we'll mark them individually. What are these in general?
This in general contains 7 pieces of an enlargement of blood swatches. One set labeled H, A, through E. 5 of them. HA, HB, HC, HD, HE.
Are those blow-ups of the pictures that we saw in the tray that had the same markings, the one picture you took at Cellmark?
Selma,
Here.
yes.
All subject to motion to strike, same grounds.
Your Honor,
as to
I would-
blow-ups.
Roll, proceed,
Wasn't it supposed to be done at another time?
proceed.
What are the other two?
The other two is the enlargement by same scale, same proportion, the two swatches from DOJ, Department of Justice form.
Your Honor, these, I'd ask them to mark, is this board magnetized, Dr. Lee?
Yes,
Are these blow-ups of the swatches also magnetized?
yes.
And, Your Honor, on the back of the magnetized swatches are labels HA, HB, HC, HD, and HE that correspond with the Cellmark swatches. So I'd ask that those be labeled,
We'll do 1362 HA, HB, HC, et cetera,
okay,
so that we'll know what they are.
thank you. And then the remaining two swatches,
Are these DOJ?
the DOJ swatches.
How about DOJ 1 and DOJ 2?
Okay, let me just get a,
1362 DOJ 1 and DOJ 2.
and the record should reflect, I'm just going to lay them out for a second, Your Honor, if I might, on the jury box so that the jury can see the labels on the back.
The labels on the back? No, the labels aren't relevant for the jurors at
Well,
this point.
the H, A, B, C. All right.
We'll need some foundation as to scale and correlation, counsel.
Dr. Lee, could you describe the process by which the swatches and this board were enlarged?
They all have a ruler. The red ruler is my ruler. That's a so-called 6-inch ruler. So basically, you can look at this. This is a metric system. And 1 millimeter is equivalent now to 18 millimeter. That's the ruler enlargement. So the rest of a pattern is enlarged with it.
Your Honor, for the record, Dr. Lee produced one of his rulers. Could we
Yes.
mark that as an exhibit?
Yes, we'll make that 1362 comma ruler. I take it this is one of your souvenir rulers?
Yes.
Thank you.
And also for the record, I don't know if this was reflected, he was using this ruler to measure the enlargement.
Yes.
And were the swatches enlarged in the same fashion?
I did not enlarge those myself.
Did you direct that they be enlarged in a 1-to-1?
Yes.
Now,
What's your question? What to
what was your direction with respect to these?
I said enlarge with the same scale, same proportion.
Now, Dr. Lee, what can you tell us about the nature of these wet transfer patterns that are depicted on 1362?
The mechanism of this transfer is relative, straightforward, and simple. A wet swatch have to contact this surface cause such a transfer. It's no alternative. That's the scientific fact. We see some transfer. That's called mechanism. As for the manner, they may have different explanation.
At this point, no question pending.
All right, next question.
All right. Dr. Lee, have you made an effort using these swatches, looking at the transfer patterns, to see if you can match up the swatches to the patterns? And could you explain your analysis?
We have 7 swatches. Appear to be 4 patterns. However, we do see some of the pattern appear to either have a movement or some addition. But we don't have all 7 this.
When you
This-
say, when you say all 7, you mean you don't have 7?
I don't have 7 perfect pattern, transfer pattern. I have 7 swatches. One of those patterns appear to be a mirror image of each other. That's consistent with a parallelogram, which almost fit of one of these swatches.
1 second, please. The record reflects that Dr. Lee has pointed to the pattern on the upper left-hand side of 1362, a pattern on the upper right-hand side of 1362, and he is handling a swatch that is labeled HE.
H-E.
And because it's magnetized, he's placed it over that pattern. Yes.
You can fit here. If this portion of the paper touch this one, because this side going to fit on this side. So that's why we refer a copy and mirror image. The next one I can see could be fit is this one. Only portion fit this corner, but the other side maybe some reason did not have a direct contact, so that this one is a copy.
But the record reflects that Dr. Lee has been referring here to the swatch labeled HD and is referring to the transfer pattern on the left side of 1362, but is lower than the other one he previously referred to.
Why don't we mark these 1 through 4 going left to right? That'll be easier if we do that for the record.
Okay.
Why don't you take a marker and just have Dr. Lee number them 1 through 4 starting at the left.
The further left-hand side one, we mark was 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mr. Schiff.
All right. Dr. Lee, you were about to, before I interrupted you, move on to the next swatch and pattern.
I think we lost one swatches.
This was HD, the one you were just referring to.
Right. as I explained earlier, 1 and 4 could be a mirror image. 2 may be explainable. 3, if you look carefully, maybe the view is not too good, but you look carefully, appear to be a double image with a triangle shape. So the only triangle I have is this HB. However, this triangle is much bigger than this triangle. Unless this triangle folded in certain condition, which I have no knowledge of it. The rest of 4, I can't find any place to fit. By looking at pattern, looking at the shape and the number, unless have other type of explanation.
All right,
Doc-
Mr. Scheck, sorry, forgive me for interrupting at this point. We have a request for a comfort break, so we'll stay in place, and any jurors who need to take a quick comfort break, go ahead right now.
And Your Honor, could we take that opportunity to approach quickly?
Next question.
Non-responsive.
Specifically, what experience, personal experience, do you have in observing and noting the drying of swatches of this nature? Could you describe that experience for us?
Overruled.
A drop of stain, blood stain found on a surface. If the stain already dry, if you try to transfer to a swatch, you have to wet the swatch.
This is non-responsive, Your Honor. I don't think the witness understands.
I think he's,
State another question. The issue is this witness's personal experience with blood swatching using swatches of this technique, this particular size and type, handling, packaging, etc.
Dr. Lee, do you have experience with the use of wetting swatches of this nature, swatching blood stains, and then observing how long it takes them to dry?
Yes.
Could you describe for us your experience in that regard?
Generally, approximately 3 hours should
Well,
dry.
Your Honor, that's
Wait.
non-responsive.
Answer stricken, jurors to disregard.
Have you done that? Have you observed others do that?
Yes.
Answer will stand. Next question.
All right? And when you have done that and observed others do that, how long does it take swatches of this nature to dry?
Sustained. Inadequate foundation.
All right? When I say do that,
Mr. Scheck, what I'm interested in,
I
personal experience swatching, personal experience in the drying process, personal experience then having dried them, then packaging them, personal experience on the witness stand, still undergoing direct examination by Mr. Scheck. And Mr. Scheck, I understand you have 1 or 2 closing questions.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Dr. Lee, the last answer you just gave this jury with respect to this board is you said something is wrong. Could you please explain what you mean?
What I mean,
Calls for a conclusion, Your Honor. Opinion, speculation, no foundation.
Overruled.
what I mean, there are 7 swatches. Maybe a potential 8 swatches. 4 imprints. What transferred on the paper. If 7 swatches all dry, I shouldn't see any wet transfer. If 7 swatches all wet, I should see 7 transfers. I only see 4. The number did not add up. There may be reason to explain. I don't know.
Thank you.
Mr. Goldberg? All right, may we approach with the court reporter, please? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, Mr. Scheck, can you take the boards down, please? All right, back on the record. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the day as far as the jury is concerned. I want you to rest assured that I'll be working all rest of the afternoon, all day Saturday and Sunday. Please have a pleasant weekend, but before I let you go, remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case, conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you, or allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. And as far as the jury is concerned, we'll stand in recess until Monday morning at 9 a.m. And Dr. Lee, you may step down. All right, thank you. All right, we'll stand in recess.